Shalom, shalom, Israel, shalom. It's Brother Raya. Want to give all honor and glory to the Most High God, Yahweh, Bahashema Mashiach, Malak Yahushua. Another strong shalom to all of the mighty brothers that go out there and labor on the highways and byways, making their body a living sacrifice. In the rain, the tumults, the demons, the uprises, the uproars, they out there standing 10 toes down for the name of the Lord. Another strong shalom to all of the mighty brothers that are not out there as of yet, but building themselves up, reading, praying, fasting, being diligent, taking notes, doing everything they could do to put themselves in a position to shake the hand and wake up the hopeful elect. Another strong shalom to all of the mighty Akwaf in this thing that actually sincerely reverence their husbands, being teachers of good things to the children at home, being quiet, shamefaced, submissive, loving, steadfast, cooking, sewing, cleaning, doing all of the righteous acts of our foremothers on fire for the Lord. Another strong shalom to all of the mighty Akwaf that are not married as of yet, but building themselves up, reading, praying, and fasting, being submissive, right, to the coming of our Lord Yahushua. Another strong shalom to all of the mighty children in this thing, abstaining from all lust, concupiscence, and peer pressure, standing 10 toes down for the name of the Lord. And last but not least, another strong shalom to the 12 tribes scattered abroad, making their body a living sacrifice. Right, this is going to be an in-depth breakdown, right, of Romans, the 11th chapter, and a drafting in and a mystery of the Gentiles. Right, because a lot of Christians, they like to go to Romans 11 and they break it down completely wrong. A lot of brothers in Israel break it down completely wrong. We have to go inside in the last days, open up the books, and rightly divide the word of truth. Right, let me get this quick precept. It's the book of 2 Timothy, chapter 2, and verse number 15. Study to shew thyself approved unto God. So why are you studying? Are you studying to go on the highways and byways and just confound everybody? Are you studying in a wicked spirit to know more than the next man? And the Lord says, study to shew thyself approved unto God. I mean, our whole study and our mindset is to shew ourselves approved unto God, that we may rightly discern, that we may rightly judge, that we will rightly have the understanding of what the scriptures are talking about. Because you're actually handling Yahushua when you study. You're going into Genesis, you're going into Revelation, you're going into Daniel, you're going into Ezekiel. You're handling the body of the Lord. So you have to study it, examine it, that you may know how to handle it and understand it. It says, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed. Because you have a lot of workmen, they're ashamed in a lot of things. Meaning what? They may build a house, but the house they built it, the roof is leaking. Back door is crooked. The foundation is off. And the Lord said, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed. I mean, whatever you build on from the foundation of understanding that was given to you, right, by you studying is what you're going to build. A lot of people may get the understanding and they start building on a false ideology or breaking down the scriptures wrong. Then 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 10 years from now, their foundation is going to be off. Their roof is going to cave in, right? Their windows are tainted, right? All of the different things in the attic are destroyed. So you want to make sure that you're not ashamed in the things that you're building off of. It says rightly dividing the word of truth. Meaning what? You have to divide the word of truth from fables and lies. And that's what only studying, right, to dive in is going to give you. It's going to give you confidence, man. Mabathak, man. Right? It's going to give you confidence. It's going to give you strength. It's going to give you might. It's going to give you zeal. The more you study and the more understanding you have, right, the greater you'll be able to start teaching. The more you can confound a Christian, the more you can be able to show that zeal you understand by the things that you study, right? Let's break this down through the spirit. Let's go to the mighty book of Romans. This is Romans, the 11th chapter, right? Chapter 1. And it reads, I say then, have God casted away his people? Now, this is manyfold, but we're going to break it down scriptural and textual in its context. Because a lot of people, they like to break things down spiritual, but they never know the context. If you're going to break down the Holy Scriptures, best believe you have to know the context. You can't break every single thing down spiritually and don't know the context of it. Because everything will be the same prophecy. There won't be a physical Pharaoh that existed. There won't be a physical king or a physical noble or a physical prince, right, that existed in the scriptures during that time, whether it be of Israel or heathen. You have to dive in and know the timelines, the dates, the context. All of this is important by handling the scriptures. It says, I say then, have God cast away his people? Meaning what? Did the Lord cast away his people? Now, on one fold, it's talking about the Gentiles, but on another fold, it's talking about the Jews, right? It says, God forbid, for I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham of the tribe of Benjamin. Because at this time, right, the northern kingdom, when you go into it, right, they were alienated, you understand, and they were afar off, right? They were your strangers, right? They were your aliens, right? They were your men, you understand, and women casted away, right? They were not drafted in and or knew the covenant and understanding by their long wickedness of idolatry and madness. Now, when you actually go into it, right, you had Solomon, he reigned. Now, from Solomon, you had Rehoboam. Now, when Rehoboam, his son, reigned during that time around 930 BC, right? And after that, like, I want to get this quick precept going into some quick history before we dive into it. All right. Let's go to First Kings. And I want to start at this quick precept. I mean, this whole thing, right, is fire when you're going into it, right? But I want to get this quick account. All right. Let's go to First Kings chapter 13. So much I want to touch on. I'm going to start back at the 11th chapter real fast. Then I'm going to jump. All right. This is the book of First Kings chapter 11 and verse number 26. Right. And it reads, and Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, an Ephraimite of Zidria, Solomon's servant, whose mother's name was Uriah, a widowed woman, even he lifted up his hand against the king. And this was the cause that he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built Millo. Right. So when you actually go into the history, this man Jeroboam that was over, right, the northern kingdom, he lifted up his hand, meaning he went against Solomon on a matter. Now, the matter he went against Solomon on was building, because he was industrious. He was wise. He knew how to build. He was like an architect. He knew how to construct different things and build cities. It says, and repair the breaches of the city of David, his father. And the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, and Solomon, seeing the young man, that he was industrious. So just because you're industrious doesn't mean you have a mind of the Lord. You have a lot of people they're wise in architectural work, right? They're wise in building or fixing cars, or they're wise in mathematics. You may be wise on a carnal sense, but your spirit isn't right. You have a lot of carnal people that know how to build. But does that mean I'm going to let you bring that evil spirit of adultery, madness, and murder in the house of the Lord to repair it and build it? So this man's mind was in idolatry and witchcraft, but yet he was industrious and he moved in a certain spirit as if he was going to do the work of the Lord. He made him a ruler over all the charge of the house of Joseph. Now, this was the downfall, right, of the northern kingdom, right, by this man. Because actually, when you go into the history, right, of all the things that he built and the things that he did, he really overthrew, right, the northern kingdom. Right, let me get this quick precept. This is the book of First Kings chapter 12, and I'm going to start at verse 25, right, and it reads, it says, then Jeroboam built Shechem in Mount Ephraim, and dwelt therein, and went out from thence and built Pelincium. Right, so this man was building up, right, the breaches. He was building up Ephraim. He was building up Penuel. He was building up Shechem, and he was doing all of these different things in all of the isles during his time because he was industrious. So if you set the wrong man over the wrong office, what is he going to build? He's going to build high places for idolatry. Now, if this man was set over these high places, you understand, these buildings and all of these different things, what do you think he's going to do? If your mind's not right, you're going to give the whole land into witchcraft and evilness, man. As is the judge, so is the officer, like it says in Sirach chapter 10 and verse 1. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return into the house of David, if this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem. So he said, look, these people heart going to go back to the kingdom in the house of David if they go up to do sacrifice at Jerusalem. Then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam, the king of Judah. And they shall kill me and go against Rehoboam, king of Judah. Whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold and said unto them, it is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Right? So in Samaria and these different places in Ephraim, his mind wasn't to build up Ephraim, for Ephraim to be mighty, from Ephraim to have a kingdom and righteousness. His mind as he led the people was folly and madness, man. His mind was evil, to hate his own brother and for their hearts not to turn rightfully to David, their king, as they should. Because, I mean, rightfully, we're not even supposed to have a king. When you read the book of 1 Samuel, the 12th chapter, when you read the book of 1 Samuel, the 18th chapter, various of the precepts, right? 1 Samuel, the 13th chapter, it witnesses these matters. And I'm going to touch on something real fast. We're not even supposed to have a king. What does Sirach, the 17th chapter, say? Right in 17 all the way down. Let me get this quick account. So through the lust of trying to be like the heathens and the other nations, right, the Lord granted us a request to have a king over us. But from the beginning, it wasn't rightfully so. Read the book of 1 Samuel, the 8th chapter. Right? Read Judges, the 8th chapter, verse 22 all the way down. We always lusted after a king and a ruler and a man to guide us when Yahweh Shem Yahushua was our ruler. He was our king. He was the one that guided us. Right? This is the book, right, of 1 Samuel chapter 12. Right? And I'm going to start at verse 18. Right? And it reads, I mean, this whole thing is fire. I don't want to read too much. I'm going to start at 10, right? Matter of fact, I'm going to start at, let me see what I want. So I can bear with me. Get more straight to the point. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 12. And I'm going to just start at 12. It says, when ye saw that Naash, the king of the children of Ammon, came against you, ye said unto me, nay, but a king shall reign over us, when the Lord your God was your king. So from the very beginning, we already had a king. We didn't need Saul to arise. We didn't need these men to arise to lead us. When we're in order and understand to keep the law, statutes, and commandments through the visions and the seers and the prophets, the Most High always directed us. He always led us. He always gave us strength and honor and understanding. He always gave us an oracle. But now you understand through lust and leadership of envy in the other nations, we always wanted somebody to be set over us. Now, therefore, behold the king whom ye have chosen, whom ye have desired, and behold, the Lord hath set a king over you. If ye will fear the Lord and serve him and obey his voice and not rebel against the commandment of the Lord, then shall both ye and also the king that reigneth over you continue following the Lord your God. But if you will not obey the voice of the Lord your God, but rebel against the commandment of the Lord, then shall ye the hand of the Lord be against you as it was against your fathers. That's exactly what happened when the breach and the division of the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Because when David was set up in the house of David, right, that was the rulership and the leadership of the Jews, right? And out of that wicked breach and depart, right, through vanity, through hatred, right, through division, and through all the things that went on during that time. When you read the book, right, of 1 Kings, right, the 12th chapter, right? And I'm going to get this real fast in 1 Kings chapter 12. There came division, right? They were speaking about stoning men and men divided, and you had different elders that were during the time of David all the way to the time of Rehoboam that, you know, helped Solomon out and construct the people, and all hell broke loose when that division was taking place. Right, let's go to 1 Kings chapter 12 and verse number 16. So when all Israel saw that the king hearkened not unto them, the people answered the king, saying, what portion have we in David? Right, because Rehoboam didn't follow the counsel, right, of the elder men. He followed the counsel of the young men and leaned on his own understanding. Neither have we inheritance in the sons of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel, now see to thy own house, David. So Israel departed unto their tents. Right? Meaning they all departed and they left. But as for the children of Israel, which dwelt in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. Then King Rehoboam set Adoram, who was over the tribute, and all Israel stoned him with stones, that he died. So the king set Adoram over all the tribute. But what happened when Israel got wind of that, man? And Israel was around. They start stoning them with stones. The division was so deep, so brutal, so hatred, so divided between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, they were killing one another. You had the Ephraimite wars when you actually go into it in the book, right? I'm not trying to turn this into a history lesson of the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, but the Lord said he have not power over his spirit to retain his spirit, right? But I want to get this quick point in Isaiah, the 7th chapter, right? You had the Syro-Ephraimite wars. All right, I'm gonna pull that up real fast. The Syro-Ephraimite wars, right? It says the Syro-Ephraimite war was a conflict which took place in 8th century BC between the kingdom of Judah and the alliance of Aram, Damascus, and the kingdom of Israel, based in Samaria. So you had a whole war, brutal war kicking off. And we're not fighting against the so-called white man. Are we not going against the Arabians? Are we not going against the Japhites? We're not going against the Moabites. We're going against our own brothers, man. That's how deep the division was when it kicked off from the part. One followed the Lord, the other one followed their own mind and heart and the spiritual demon Satan and all of idolatry. When you go into idolatry, right, and go into these gods and these things that they were worshiping, that could be another lesson, but it was deep. That's why even to this very day, you got the Northern Kingdom, right? They do a lot of what they would call imagery, Mother Mary, right, the cross, right? They bow down, they light candles, they do a lot of rituals and things that are passed down by their fathers, but not in righteousness. But it's all praise to the Most High. They're waking up out of that. You have a lot of mighty, mighty Northern Kingdom prophets, elders, right, nobles. They're waking back up and they're coming back to the truth. But during this time, right, like I said, I want to go into it. It was one of the most brutal wars that we ever raged in the scriptures. Hundreds of thousands of our own people were killed by ourselves. Let's get this real fast. It's the book of Isaiah, chapter 7, and verse number 1. And it came to pass in the days of Asa, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Rilamoth, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. Why is he coming up, the king of Israel, to war against Jerusalem? That's off. Meaning they're already making confederate with the heathen to come up against their own brother. It says, and it was told the house of David, saying Syria is confederate with Ephraim. Meaning you had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And some had told David, right, through confederacies and messengers, right, that Syria, right, was confederate, meaning in an alliance with Ephraim. And his heart was moved in the heart of his people, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind, man. So David said when he got wind of that, right, he was moved like the trees are moved with the wind. It says, then said the Lord unto Isaiah, go forth and meet Hazah, thou and Shir-Jerubbeth, thy son, at the end of the conduct of the upper pool and the highway of the fuller's field, right, and give him a prophecy. It says, and saying to him, take heed and be quiet, fear not, neither be faint-hearted for the two tails of these smoking firebands. Meaning, don't fear that they're coming up against you. These two, right? You had Syria, right? And you had the house, right, of Ephraim coming up. Don't be fearful of the two tails of these smoking firebands, right? Meaning these these alliances and these soldiers coming up against you. Don't fear about that. For the fierce anger of Rezin with Syria and the son of Remaloth, because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaloth have taken evil counsel against these same. Why your own brother taking evil counsel against you, man? Hey, but the Lord said, don't fear that. Don't fear Ephraim going off, banging with Syria and the son of Remaloth. Don't fear any of these things. Because you had Tiglath-Pileser III. He came into play, as you read into this, and he turned his hand against the Ephraimites when they were so-called in the alliance together. Right? So when we divide as a people, and we divide in love, compassion, right? The scriptures, breaking things down, there's nothing but division between us. But when we join together and become one stick, when we join together as the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom through the work of the Most High, not hate on one another, But I was watching something not too long ago, and it's now I'm very ignorant to the gang wars and different things like that with the Northern Kingdom. But I was watching something, and it was these older men, right? They had to be maybe in their 50s, late 40s, right? And they were saying that they turned their hand against their younger generation because they wanted to be like Jake, wanted to be like the so-called black man. He said, we don't act like that. We wear our khakis like this. We do this. We get tattoos like this. We don't act like that. We don't move like that. And they started to set their hand against the younger generation of their hood. They started fighting them and warring against them. And they're the same people, all because they tried to emulate and move in a spirit of Judah, right? So that hatred and that division is to this very day. It says, let us go against Judah and vex it. So this is the mind of the heathen and Ephraim. Let's go up against Judah and vex it. And let us make a breach therein for us and set a king in the midst of it, even the son of Tabeli. Now, do you think that it's going to be wise to have Syria, Ephraim, right, joining together in one king? No, because these heathens hate us. But Ephraim's mind was so angry and showing so much hatred to their brother that it overthrew their own judgment. It says, thus saith the Lord God, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and that of Damascus is risen. And within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it be not a people. And that's exactly what happened. When you depart from idolatry, you depart from hatred on your own brother, you depart from doing your own thing, having your own king and your own rulers, what does that do? It breaks you down as a people and divides you as a nation. And that's exactly what happened, man, when you go into the history of this. And they became not a people, right? So I'm going to go back into this through the spirit, right? Let's go to the book of Isaiah chapter 9. It's the book of Isaiah chapter 9. And I'm going to start at verse 17, right? It says, I'm going to start at 16. I mean, this whole thing is fire. But I'm going to start at 16. For the leaders of this people cause them to err, right? And they that are led of them are destroyed. Therefore, the Lord shall have no joy in their young men, neither shall have mercy on their fatherless and widows. For everyone that is an hypocrite, it's like everyone is an hypocrite and an evildoer, and every mouth speaketh folly. For all this, his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. What is this actually going into? What is this going? It's going into the war in context. It's going into our people, right? The northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Now, you could break it down twofold. It's going into the heathens, destruction, wickedness. I mean, you could get, nasty in the spirit and righteousness, break it down in scriptures and fit it, you understand, perfectly with the precepts and prophecy. But the context of the situation is this, verse 18. For wickedness burneth as the fire. It shall devour the bribers and thorns, and shall kindle in the thickets of the forest, and they shall mount up like the lifting up of smoke. This is talking about the war, meaning whoever's wicked going against this thing and all hell is breaking loose, it's going to be like the lifting up of the smoke, meaning whoever the bribers, the thorns, the thickets, the forest is being kindled. All of this is talking about the Lord destroying, and it's being a massive bloodshed. It says, through the wrath of the Lord of hosts is the land darkened, and the people shall be as the fuel of the fire. You could break that down. It's talking about World War III in the days to come, but it's also talking about during this land, during the Syro-Ephraimite wars. No man shall spare his brother. Let me read that again. No man shall spare his brother. And that's exactly what happened. Nobody spared their brother. They were killing each other, choking each other out, stabbing each other, right? Hopping out, guerrilla warfare, and all hell was breaking loose. It says, and he shall snatch on the right hand and be hungry, and he shall eat on the left hand, and they shall not be satisfied. They shall eat every man the flesh of his own arm. Manasseh, Ephraim, right? And Ephraim, Manasseh, and they together shall be against Judah. So what is that talking about, man? It said they shall snatch on the right hand and be hungry. They shall eat on the left hand and not be satisfied. They're going to be robbing each other, killing each other, invading each other's houses. Look how deep the hatred was during this time of the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. So as all of this trickles down into the New Testament, you have to understand the history. You can't just say, well, one was lighter than the other, man. One has a little bit more straighter hair or curlier hair, and the other one has a little bit more kinkier hair, right? One of them speaks Spanish, and the other one speaks English. It's way deeper than that. The history of something so long. Hey, let your grandfather and somebody else's grandfather not really bang together for generations and generations. It'll have a spirit of hatred between you and those people for whatever reason. You don't even know. The same way in righteousness with David and Jonathan, and even in Jonathan's son, Mishpasoth, and the generations before, as they made an everlasting covenant in righteousness. They love one another. It says this. Let me get this quick history. And I want to pull that in 2 Kings, the 16th chapter, right? After I finish reading this, and then we're going to go back to Romans 11. Right? Now, when you go to 2 Kings, right, 16, and I'll probably start at probably around verse, I mean, this whole thing is fire. I'm going to start at 3, right? It says, but he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, yet he made his sons to pass through the fire. And that's what they were doing, giving them to Molech, right? And there's nothing more pure than a child sacrifice because a child is innocent. It's likened into a year old as they did the lambs and the bullocks, or younger than a year old, because you would offer up in a sacrifice in the law a lamb without spot and without blemish, a year old. So they would take their own children that are more pure than the blood of an animal to sacrifice it upon Molech, the spiritual demon Satan, right? According to the abomination of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel. And he sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places on the hills under every green tree. Right? And that's spiritual. It says, then Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, son of Remaloth, king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to war. And they besieged Hazah, but could not overcome him. Right? At that time, Rezin, king of Syria, recovered Ithlat to Syria and drave the Jews from Elath. And the Syrians came to Elath and dwelt there unto this day. Check this out. So Azah sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser. So this is Tiglath-Pileser III, right? I know I'm a butcher trying to spell this, but I want to pull this man up, right, real fast through the spirit. Tiglath-Pileser III. Now, he was the king of the Nero, right, Assyrian Empire, right, from 745 BC until his death in 727, right? So what did he do? What was he significant of? His children, Saigon II and Salmanassar V, and his grandchild, Sennacherib. When you're going into the history of these kings, right, that reign. Now, what did he do? Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 16 and verse 7. So Azaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am thy servant and thy son. Meaning he's yielding unto him. When did the Lord say to do that, man? When did the Lord say to do that? Let's go back to the book real fast of Isaiah, the 7th chapter. When did the Most High say that? Because the last time I read, and it wasn't that long ago, right, in Isaiah, the 7th chapter, the Lord said this. This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 7, and I'm going to start at verse, right, number 4. It says, and say unto him, take heed, be quiet, fear not, neither be faint-hearted for the two tails of these smoking firebands. So he told him not to be afraid. He told him not to be overthrown in his mind. He told him to be at ease. But he didn't listen. And what happens to kings that don't listen? They get overthrown. They bow down to the heathen. It don't matter if it's a million army coming right now and they're marching and they stomping and they're doing their little chant. They have all of the torches and everything is going around. If Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, whether by an angel, snap me in a vision, by a prophet, jack my spirit up where I cannot contain or say or gainsay, I can't be afraid, man. Because if you set your hand to fear, the Lord is going to overthrow you. That's why this man, it says, so Hazar sent messengers to Ticklar, right, Pisalar, king of Assyria, saying, I am thy servant and thy son. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Syria and out of the hand of the king of Israel, which rise up against me. So he went to go to an alliance, right, to Tiglath-Pileser III to help him fight against Syria and against Ephraim. What sense does that make? So now it's two kingdoms, which are really one, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, going outside of their kingdom to get other heathenistic kingdoms to help them fight against their own damn people, man. That's madness. That's like as right now, it's a northern kingdom, brother, and I'm from the southern kingdom, and I go get Esau. Now me and Esau banging together, and he go get Japheth, or he go get Arab. Now all of them are joining a confederacy, and I'm confederate with Esau. Now we're trying to go fight one another. So the war in the mind of the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom was so brutal and so strong of hatred that this brewed away all the way during the 7th century, right? When you go to 700 BC, right? Let's go back to the book of Isaiah, the 9th chapter, real fast, and finish reading verse 21. Manasseh, Ephraim, and Ephraim, Manasseh, and they together shall be against Judah. For all this, his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. Meaning what? More judgment, more wrath, more vengeance, right? When you're going into it. Now, I'm going to read this quick point, because actually when you go into this kind of trickled down to King Hezekiah, right? The tribute and going into Tiglath-Pileser III and the things that were going down all the way from that war until the time of Hezekiah, right? Let me read this history. It says the Assyrians intervened on the behalf of Judah, conquering Israel and Aram, Damascus, and the Philistines. However, the post-war alliance only brought more trouble for the king of Judah. Hazar had to pay tribute, check that out, to Tiglath-Pileser III with treasuries from the temple of Jerusalem. You wanted to take down your brother so bad, you're stealing the church's money. You're stealing the Most High's money to give to the heathen to fuel the war, man. Because every war has to be fueled with money. You can't go to war without money, man. The people with the highest money and budget tend to be able to afford the most nuclear weapons and missiles, right? The most guns, armories, tanks, the different things that what they say money can't buy, man. There's certain things you can't buy off the streets, right? Because your local, whoever dealer don't even have a grasp to get their hands on certain weapons, man. Right? So money is going to buy and help and fund and fuel wars. So they have to pay tribute, right, to Tiglath-Pileser III, right, from the temple of Jerusalem and the royal treasury. He also built idols of Assyrian gods in Judah to find favor with this new ally. And we're not allies with the heathens, man. We're not dealing with that. So that's what had his grandchild, right, when you go into it, Sennacherib, right? Yeah, Salmanassar V, right? When you're going into it with King Hezekiah said, look, I'm not paying you tribute. So the tribute and alliance that they had all the way from during that time to King Hezekiah reign, he said, look, I'm not paying you tribute no more, man. And then all hell broke loose, and the Lord sent down an angel and killed all of those Assyrians. Well, but we're going to get back into it through the Spirit. Hey, this is the book of Romans, chapter 11, and verse number 1. I say then, have God cast away his people? God forbid. For I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. So the Lord didn't cast away his people. This is twofold. He didn't cast away the southern kingdom because it was as if when he was bringing in the northern kingdom, he moved them to jealousy. So it's as if he's casting them away and now bringing in the northern kingdom. That's on one fold, but on another fold, he didn't cast away his people, meaning the northern kingdom. Or even though they were broken off, they were alienated and strangers, right? That doesn't mean that the Most High casted them away for good. Verse 2, it says, God have not cast away his people, which he foreknew. What ye not what the scripture saith of Elijah, how he maketh intercessions to God against Israel, saying, Lord, they have killed thy prophets and digged down thine altars, and I am left alone, and they seek my life. Right? So he thought he was the only prophet left on the earth when all of the wickedness was going around and Jezebel was seeking to kill all of the prophets in 1 Kings, the 18th chapter, and that war was going on. We had to hide all of the prophets in the cave by 50s. He thought he was the only one left, and she slayed and chopped down all of the prophets. It says, but what saith the answer of the God unto him? I have reserved to myself 7,000 men. 7 is a number of completion. 1,000 means infinite. And there's an infinite amount of righteousness and a complete amount of righteousness that the Most High has preserved until this very time, who have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal. And that's twofold, because you had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom that bowed down the image of Baal, that went off, that did idol worship. But yet there's still that remnant that have never bowed down their knees into the image of Baal. And the Lord said in the book of Revelation, chapter 13. All right, let me get this quick precept. It's the book of Revelation, chapter 13, right? In verse number 8. And all that dwelt upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So everybody's going to worship the so-called white man, the beast, his images, whose names are not written in the book of life. So if you never had the mind nor spirit to worship the beast coming into the truth, you understand, and never faint-hearted or looking back in the world like Lot's wife, then your name could very well be written in the book of life. It says, even so, then at this present time, also there is a remnant according to the election of grace. So you have the election of grace. You're not elected by how long your beard is, man. You're not elected by how long your fringes are. You're not elected because you hold it a 5-hour to a 12-hour camp. There's nothing to the Most High. Is it anything that you are righteous to the Lord, like it says in the book of Job, chapter 22 and verse 1 all the way down? Is it anything to the Most High that thou art righteous? What is it to the Most High that you're taking notes right now? What is it to them? It's not anything to the Most High. It's through the grace and mercy that the Most High even chose you to call you by predestination, by his hope, by his grace and his mercy. Let's go to Ephesians, the first chapter. See, a lot of Jake get beside themselves, just like the Jews did in this context, man. They went off. They got beside themselves. They thought through their righteousness, and I'm looking down on the southern, the northern kingdom, and through them holding their council as a subhedron and all of these different things, the lower and the lesser, the greater and the lesser Sanhedrin, that means something to the Most High. And just because you had the oracles, now that's a beautiful thing and wise and strong and mighty that you had the oracles given to you, right? But that doesn't make you better and greater than your fellow brethren. Why? Because the Most High gave all of Israel a chance to repent, right, and to come into the fold. It's the book of Ephesians, chapter 1, and I'm going to start at verse, right, number 3. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Yahushua, who had blessed us with all spiritual blessings in heavenly places in Yahushua. What does that mean, blessed with all spiritual blessings? You have carnal blessings and you have spiritual blessings. A spiritual blessing is breaking down the book of Daniel. That's spiritually blessing you. You have a carnal blessing that you're able to pay your rent. You have a carnal blessing that you're able to have clothes on your back and you didn't get hit by that car, right? That's carnal because it's in the flesh. But then you have spiritual things that the Most High have granted you and given you. It says, according as he have chosen us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and without blame before him in love, having predestinated us. So the Lord predestinated everybody on this live watching, right? No matter if you're from the northern kingdom, right, or you're from the southern kingdom, right? Whether you're rich, you're poor, right, or no matter what's going on, the Most High has predestinated you.
Predestinate.
Right? It says made firm beforehand. So the word predestinate, let's go into it. to foreordain to an earthly or eternal lot or destiny by divine decree. So that's a mean definition right there, man. You're foreordained into an eternal lot that you can't change. You may not ever, ever desire the things you once desired. Why? Because the Lord has predestined you to be in the image of Yahushua, us to the adoption of the children by Yahushua. Why is it called the adoption? Because carnally, an adoption means that this isn't my child. When you had branched off, you had alienated yourself, right? You have did your lust. Yeah, you were the enemy of the Lord, right? You were a bastard, right? You were alienated and pushed afar off to where you weren't the children of God. But now through the adoption, through Yahushua. Why is Yahushua the mediator through the adoption? Because it's determined in the scriptures, born again. That's what it's going into. If you're born again, you have to come from something. And like James chapter 1 and verse 18, we're born again through Yahushua. And as the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom, whether being Gentiles in the mind, right, or breaking it down in this fold, right, the northern kingdom, the Most High has granted you the adoption of sons. It's the book of James chapter 1 and verse 18. It says, of his own will begot he us with the word of truth. So you're begot through the word. Like it says in the book of Isaiah, he's the everlasting father going into Yahushua. It's not talking about he's the Most High. He's as if he's a father because he begot us in the truth. He's our progenitor in our mind and our head to lead us as a father does. That we should be a kind of first fruits of his creation. And the word begot, right, as you go all throughout the scriptures, it means to have, children, right, your descendants. Like Paul begot men through his bonds. He begot men in the gospel. He said, though you have many, let me get this quick precept in the book. I believe that's 1 Corinthians chapter 4 and 14, if I'm not mistaken. Right? It says, I write not these things to shame you, but as my beloved sons, I warn you. Now, Paul didn't have hundreds of thousands of children, right? His sons were who? Those men that were under him, that he taught and directed. So we're begot of Yahushua through the word of truth, meaning we were adopted back in through the spirit. That's why you get this spiritual Israelite thing. There is no such thing as a spiritual Israelite. You either are an Israelite from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or you're not. It says, for though ye have 10,000 instructors in Yahushua, meaning many teachers and leaders, yet have ye not many fathers. For in Yahushua I have begotten you through the gospel. Meaning you wouldn't have never known about the circumcision and the uncircumcision spiritually if it wasn't for me. You wouldn't have known about the adoption of sons, the mystery of the Gentiles. So Paul, he kind of talking his stuff in righteousness, man. And we wouldn't be who we were if it wasn't for the adoption through Yahushua HaMashiach. Right, going back to Romans chapter 11 and verse 5. So you always have an election of grace that the Most High called you into. And if by grace, then it is no more of works. What's the spirit of Paul saying this in? Because he's getting on, right, the Jews. How do we know that? Let's go to the mighty book of Romans. Like I always say in these videos through the spirit, when you want to understand this book, you have to know the spirit of what was going on and why Paul came to Rome, why he was talking to the Romans in, right? The Ephesians, the Thessalonians, right? The Church of Corinth, right? All of these different churches, it was a spirit about it, or things that were he had to set straight and or teach. And with this, it was hypocrisy. It was the Jews mounting themselves over, you understand, the northern kingdom. It was all type of things that Paul had to set straight, right? It's the book of Romans chapter 3 and verse 1. What advantage then have the Jew? Or what profit is there of the circumcision? Meaning, what's the advantage of the Jew? What is a profit of the circumcision have? Much every way, chiefly because unto them were committed the oracles of God. And that's spiritual. Now the oracles are the law. And the oracles, when you go into it, right, in Kings, as Solomon was building his temple, you had the oracles inside of the holiest of holies, right, which is the law, right? Unto us was given the oracles, right? The priests to teach, to lead. Right, let me get this quick precept. It's the book of Sirach, chapter 33, in verse, right, number 3. It says, a man of understanding trusteth in the law, and the law is faithful unto him as an oracle. So unto us were committed the oracles of God, right? Much every way, right? Verse 3, for what if some did not believe? Should that unbelief make the faith of God without effect? What if certain Jews didn't believe that the Most High was going to draft in the Gentiles? And what does it mean, what if certain Jews didn't believe? Meaning when Paul came with his ministry and his gospel, a lot of people denied it because the division was so great. It was so strong, right? What did the Lord say in the book, right, of John chapter 4, right, in verse number 22? Right, let me get that real fast. For salvation is of the Jews. This is the book of John chapter 4, verse 22. For ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. So during this time, salvation was only for the Jews. It was only for them to know how to worship the Lord, who the Lord was, given the oracles. Right at this time, the northern kingdom, they were in idolatry. They were lost. They were worshiping all type of things when you read the book of Micah, when you read the book of Hosea, when you read the book of Amos. Right? When you read all of these books, even during the time, at a split, right? When you read First Kings, the 12th chapter, the 13th chapter, right? When you read going into all of these different things that we just read, right? Second Kings, 16th chapter, and various other things. It says, but the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. The woman saith unto him, I know that Messiah cometh, which is called Christ. When he is come, he will tell us all things. Now this woman, she don't know what's going on. But then you had men that followed the Lord. You had men that knew the Lord. You had men that was getting breakdowns of the Lord. So before this time, she knew of the Messiah as all Israel did, right? Even from the time of Adam, right? Because Enoch prophesied of the Lord coming with 10,000 of his saints. But she didn't know he was on the scene and what was going on. So that the southern kingdom was with the Lord and the northern kingdom was alienated. Yahushua saith unto her, I that speaketh unto thee am he. And upon this, his disciples and marveled that he talked with the woman. And yet no man said, what speakest thou? Or why talkest thou to her? Because it was a division. What are you doing talking to her? A Samaritan. What you don't know, the division and the beef, and you don't know what transpired, but hey, that's the Lord. The woman then left her water pot and went her way into the city and said to the men, come, see a man which told me all things that ever I did. Is not this the Christ? All right, going back to it, right? It says, for what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief make the faith of God without effect? And they didn't believe that that was actually going to happen. Why? Because the Most High blinded their hearts. Let me get this quick precept. That's why it was such a mystery of Paul and the truth that he spoke in, because it was never heard before. It was unbelievable. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 1 and Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 1. This is Ephesians chapter 3 and verse number 1. For this cause I, Paul, the prisoner of Yahushua, for you Gentiles, right? If ye have heard of the dispensation of the grace of God, which is given to me towards you, you ward, how that by revelation he made known unto me the mystery, as I wrote afore in few words. So what did the Lord call the Gentiles being drafted in? He called it a mystery, whereby when ye read, ye may understand my knowledge in the mystery of Yahushua. What does that mean? Why is he speaking like that? It says, whereby when ye read, ye may understand my knowledge and the mystery of Yahweh. Because these things were already spoken about that it was going to come to pass all the way in the second Esdras, all the way in the book of Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter. These things were already spoken against. That's why when men have understanding, when they read Paul, they can always see because they've seen the things in the law. They've always followed Hamashiach, Wamalak Yahushua. They followed the law, they followed the prophets, and they followed during the time of the New Testament and the apostles. So it's not going to trip them up. But men that are hardened-hearted, that only believe in the law, don't believe in spiritual things, never followed the Lord, contradicted everything he spoke up against, and went against his prophet, right, and his apostle, Paul, right, those men are going to be blinded because they don't know the truth, right? But let me prove that real fast. Let me get this quick precept. Right, I'm going to have to open up another one through the Spirit. Let's go to the mighty book, right, of Deuteronomy, chapter 32, and I'm going to start at verse 21, and it reads, I'm going to start at 20. It says, and he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be. For they are a very forward generation, children in whom there is no faith. So who had the faith? We talk about faith and the Gentiles and, what's this big spirit of faith on the New Testament? Because there were no faith when the Jews had the law. They had to be shown what true faith was by jealousy by the Gentiles, which had faith. And that's already prophesied it from during the time of Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter, right, from 1446 BC. It says, they had moved me to jealousy, that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those that are not a people. What does those that are not a people mean? Did not the Lord said in Hosea? Right, let's get the book of Hosea. Right, in a place, right, it was said that ye are not the children of God, they should be the sons of the living God. Paraphrasing great. Go to Hosea chapter 1 and verse 10. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. So the Lord said, hey, look, it's been places where ye have said you're not my people. They've been cut off in these places. But the Lord said, look, you have moved me to jealousy, which are those that are not a people. Talking about what? The northern kingdom. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. The foolish nation is definitely talking about the northern kingdom. And the Lord called him a silly dove, man. Silly and foolish is the same thing. This is Hosea chapter 7, verse 11. Ephraim also is like a silly dove. Meaning what, man? You're not serious. You're not taking this thing how you should. You're drunk. You're all over the place, right? You're not stern. You're not about business. You're just silly. It says, without heart, they call to Egypt. They go to Assyria. I mean, they're trusting in everything and leaning upon every stay but the Most High. So silly, right, and foolish is the same thing. For a fire is kindled in mine anger, and shall burn into the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase, and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. I will heap mischief upon them. I will send mine arrows upon them. Check this out. They shall be burnt with hunger and devoured with burning heat, with bitter destruction. I will also send the teeth of beasts upon them, with the poison of serpents of the dust. The sword without and terror within shall destroy both young men and the virgin, the suckling also with the men of gray hair. And so like I said, I would scatter them into the corners and make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. So, I mean, what is this going into? Let me jump down to verse 28. But they are a nation void of counsel, neither is there any understanding in them. Oh, that they were wise, that they understood this, that they would consider their latter end. right? So the Lord already prophesied that, right, during the time of, like I said, Deuteronomy. So this election of grace and this drafting in and everything that we're going into, it's generational. This thing had to been happening for a long time to this very moment when Paul set his hand to the gospel to teach these things. That's why it was so unbelievable, but only the elect could see it. Right? That's the spirit of these first couple of chapters. So like these first couple of verses. Verse 6. And if by grace, then it is no more of works. Why? Because Deuteronomy 6:25 says your righteousness shall be of the law, shall be of your works, shall be of the commandments. Right? This is Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 25. Right? But it couldn't have been of commandments anymore because the northern kingdom didn't have the commandments. Right? They were alienated. They were lost. They didn't stay true and hold tight to Yahweh Shem Yahushua. So just because you don't have the commandments, does that mean you're over and done for? Hey, the Most High is a righteous God, man, a righteous judge. Right? Even in the law, right, when you read the book of Leviticus, the 5th chapter, you have poor of our people. If you couldn't bring a lamb or whatever the case may be, and you could bring a dove. If you couldn't bring a dove, you could bring flour. Because you have different sets of people that couldn't do certain things. I may not be able to afford a lamb. So that mean I'm going to get destroyed or stoned? No, I could bring a dove. What if I couldn't afford a dove? I could bring some flour. So the Most High is righteous with his pardon of iniquity and salvation and making atonement to help. It's the book of Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 25. And it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments before the Lord our God as he hath commanded us. Right? So it says, but if it be of works, then it is no more grace. Otherwise, work is no more work. And it can't just be all of work and no grace because it is no more work at that point. Right? You are righteous. You don't need Yahweh Shem Yahushua of his grace at that point. It says, what then? Israel have not obtained that which he seeketh for. Right? But the election have obtained it, and the rest were blinded. It says, what? Then Israel have not obtained, have not obtained that which he seeketh for. And they seeketh for righteousness, but they couldn't obtain true righteousness. Because your righteousness is not just going to come by keeping the commandments. Look at Abraham. He's known as what? The father of faith. Why is Abraham chosen? Obviously, he's our father, and obviously he's righteous. But past being righteous and being our father, why out of all people was Abraham chosen to be the father of faith? Why was he chosen to be made an example in righteousness of the circumcision? Because his righteousness was righteous way before he got circumcised. It wasn't that he got circumcised, then he became righteous. So it's not of a work that makes you righteous. It's the faith that you have in Yahweh Shem Yahushua along with your works. It says this, according as it were written, God hath given them the spirit of slumber. Check that out. Eyes that they should not see and ears that they should not hear unto this day. And that's scary, man, that the Lord could block out your mind and give you over to that, man. That's scary. That could happen to any one of us at any given time. This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 29, right? And I'm going to start at verse, right, number 18. It says, and in the day shall the deaf hear, and the words of the book, and the eyes of the blind shall see out of obscurity and out of darkness. The meek also shall increase their joy in the Lord, and the poor among men shall rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. But the terrible one is brought to naught, and the scorner is consumed, and all that watch for iniquity are cut off. Check that out. So what's the Lord saying, man? The latter end of Jacob is going to be increased, and the eyes are going to be open. This is the point, verse 24. They also that erreth in the spirit shall come to understand. Now, whether that be the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom, whether that be Jake lost in the world, it's going to be a spirit to open up your eyes in the last days. And that's what's going on. A lot of people's eyes are being awakened, right, to their true nationality, right, of wisdom of the Most High. It says, and they that murmured shall learn doctrine. And a lot of men have once murmured. Paul once murmured, man. Paul was lost. Paul went off. But guess what? He learned true doctrine. And the Most High was with him, right, and woke him up and guided him on the right path. Let me get these two quick precepts. I might get 3. Right, it's the book of Colossians, right? Chapter 1, verse 20. It says this, and having made peace through the blood of the cross, by him reconciled all things unto himself. By him I say, whether they be things in earth or things in heaven. So the Lord reconciled us back unto him by the death of the cross. It says, and you that were sometimes alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works, now hath he reconciled. So the Lord took back those that were alienated, cast it off, right? And now reconciled them back to the Father. Like I said, during this time, it was a mystery, right? Paul's writings. Right now, we look at it and, it's not as, I guess, confounding. But during this time, putting your mind back during this time, this was a mystery. It's the book of Romans, chapter 16 and verse 25. Now to him that is of power to establish you according to my gospel, because Paul had his gospel. Gospel is a tiding and teaching, right? And that was his lot given. You had the circumcision and the uncircumcision. Uncircumcision given to Paul, circumcision given to Peter. It says, in the preaching of Yahushua according to the revelation of the mystery, which was kept secret since the world began. So what was his gospel? It was a secret. Meaning you had to really be the elect to know that back then. So when Peter, James, and John gave him the right hand of fellowship, like you read about in Acts, the 21st chapter, they're the elect. They can see it. It's not hard to see certain things. The Lord saying, well, give me this bread and eat of my body and drink of my blood. Yeah, that sound about right. It ain't too hard to perceive. But then you have certain of his apostles, they couldn't swallow that and they walked no more with him because they couldn't perceive the secrets and things that the Lord was speaking, man. Certain things are too deep for somebody. It offends somebody. It rubs them the wrong way, and or they just can't get it. They can't get it to the point where they just close the Bible. It says this. It says, but now is made manifest. So it was once a secret, but now it's made manifest by the scriptures of the prophets, according to the commandment of the everlasting God. Meaning what? Now the books are open, and the obscurity out of darkness and the murmuring in the eyes that were once shut can now see. By what? The prophets, by Isaiah, by Moses, by these men that were before us, by Ezra, the first chapter. So now our eyes are being open to the mystery that was shut and was already manifest by the prophets, which were the elect during that time. It says, made known to all nations for the obedience of faith. All nations, because we're derived and split and spread through all nations through the obedience of faith. Right, let me get this one more quick precept and I'm going to go back to it. Let's go to Colossians. All right. It's Colossians chapter 1. All right. And I'm going to start at 25. Wherefore I am made a minister according to the dispensation of God, which is given to me for you to fulfill the word of God, even the mystery which have been hid from ages and from generations, but is now made manifest unto his saints. So if you're one of his saints, you're going to perceive and understand what's going on. Right? This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, and verse 9. And David saith, let their table be made a snare. Who is the they and their table being made a snare? It's going into the same men that delivered up Yahushua to be crucified. Judas Iscariot and an evil circumcision. It says, and a trap and a stumbling block and a recompense unto them. So even David prophesied that when you go to the book of Psalms, chapter 89. So like your 69. Right? 89 is about David, the elect. Right? Let's go to the book of Psalms, chapter 69. Right? Let me get this quick precept. This is the book of Psalms, chapter 69. Right? Let me see where I want to start at. I'm going to start at verse 22, where it is written, let their table become a snare before them and that should be have been for their welfare, let it become a trap. Let's talk about the Jews. Their tables are spiritual. That's where you sit down and dine and eat and flourish and replenish yourself. So their table where they do work and eat and survive and gain become a snare. A snare is a trap before them, and that which should have been their welfare, what should have been their welfare? Yahweh Shah, his grace and his mercy and faith, let it become a trap. Meaning the very thing that's going to save you, you set your hand against, man. Imagine that. The more righteousness comes closer to you, the more you fight it off. It says, let their eyes be darkened, that they see not, and make their loins continually to shake. Pour out thine indignation upon them, and let thy wrathful anger take hold of them. That's why the Lord said that they are a people void of counsel and understanding, because they're proud. Who are you to look down on the Lord or try to question the Lord, man? Put the Lord on trial. It says, let their habitation be desolate, and let none dwell in their tents. For they persecuted him whom thou hast smitten, and they talked to grief those whom thou hast wounded. Check that out. This is the point. Add iniquity unto their iniquity, meaning sin on top of sin. This is the point. And let them not come into thy righteousness. What is that righteousness? Faith. They had the righteousness of the law, but the Lord said through the hand of the mighty, we call David a prophet, an elder, the elect, right? Hey, man, pick your choice, man. The mighty forefather David, that they should not come into your righteousness, man. And a true righteousness, which is of faith and mercy, that's given by Hamashiach Wamalak Yahushua. So they couldn't come into the righteousness. They were blinded. So they were alienated, you understand? But yet they could see. While all of the pride and knowledge and oracles given unto the Jews, they were blinded and yet couldn't obtain righteousness. Let's go to the mighty book, right, real fast, of Romans, right? Chapter 9, right? It's the mighty book of Romans, chapter 9 and verse 31. And it reads, start at 30. What shall we say then? That the Gentiles which follow not after righteousness have obtained to the righteousness. The righteousness they didn't follow was of the commandments, because it's through the grace and mercy that ye are called. I didn't do anything to be called into this truth. I didn't sit up there and read the book of Deuteronomy all night long, and the Lord looked down and say, well, he has proven himself and he is chosen. I didn't do anything, man. A brother got caught with a blunt in his mouth, smoking the hell out of that blunt, and somebody telling him about the truth. And then he said, you know what, that kind of makes sense. I'm going to look into it. A woman may have been called doing God knows what in the dark and got rebuked on it. People have been called in the darkness of places and situations, and it wasn't through their righteousness that they followed after. It says, have obtained to righteousness, even the righteousness which is of faith. It says, but Israel, which followed after the law of righteousness, have not obtained to the law of righteousness. Meaning no matter how much you follow that law and keep the laws, you can never be righteous in the Most High's eyes. That's why Romans, the 4th chapter, said, well, Abraham will have whereof the boast, but not before Yahweh. Right in the book of Genesis, chapter 26 and 5, Abraham kept the charge of the Most High in the law. But these men were blameless. Yet were they not completely righteous until Yahweh gave them the spirit through faith to be righteous. Because it's not just of works. Whereof, because they sought it not by faith, but as it were of the works of the law. For they stumbled at the stumbling stone. So they did all of that building. But the last brick and the foundation laid, they couldn't get down on. So everything they built on top of that was crooked. And though they couldn't build on top of that, so everything they did build was on folly ground, was on folly soil, was on a crooked foundation. While men of no understanding just stood upon a stumbling stone and believed that through the works of Yahweh Shem Yahushua, they can build. Having no knowledge of sense of tools and hammers and bricks and things like that, of architectural labor and work, have built all things. So it says, as it is written, behold, I lay in Sion a stumbling stone and a rock of offense, Whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed. Right? They're going to be ashamed in that day when they see Yahweh Shem Yahushua coming with all his glory, man. Right? This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, and verse number 10. Let their eyes be darkened, we just read it, that they may not see and bow down their back always. Meaning they're not going to able to come into the righteousness of the Most High. What did they even say out of their own mouths? Let blood be upon our children forever, man. What a wicked thing to say when you're delivering up the Lord, man. It says, I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Meaning, did the Jews stumble that they may utterly just fall away? And the Most High not dealing with the Jews no more? It says, God forbid, but rather through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles, for they provoke them to jealousy. That's that same precept we read in Deuteronomy 32 and verse 20 all the way down. For if the fall of them be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them the riching of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? So the Lord says, if the fall of them be the riches of the world, and they fell. And that was the riches of the world that they fell. And the diminishing of them, right, through their height and strength that they once had, right, in the law and the oracles and being in the circumcision, the riches of the Gentiles. So that became their riches. How much more their fullness when it comes into completion? For I speak to the Gentiles, and so much as I'm an apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify my office. Because Paul did all things for the elect's sake, man. All things. He got stoned, suffered shipwreck. He traveled. He met the elders, right? He went to the sand. He did everything there was to do. He magnified his office, right? He got beat, right? He got the scars to prove it. He said, I bear in my body the marks of Yahweh Shem Yahushua. Says, if by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. So he's like, I'm trying to provoke you to emulation. Them which are of my flesh, that and might save some of them. So he's rebuking these men, but yet he's encouraging them and giving them the truth. But I want to go back to Romans, the 3rd chapter, real fast. In Romans, the 3rd chapter. This is Romans chapter 3 in verse, right? I'm going to start it on 4. God forbid, yea, let God be true and every man a liar, as it is written, that thou mayest be justified in thy sayings and mightest overcome when thou art judged. Check this out. But if our unrighteousness commend the righteousness of God, meaning we're all unrighteous, yet our unrighteousness, it commendeth the righteousness of God. Meaning what? In our lower state of us being unrighteous, it shows how righteous the Most High is. Because how unrighteous we are, it shows how much we need the Most High, and it commends the righteousness of the Most High. So even in your righteousness, as all men's righteousness is as filthy rags, but even in your righteousness, you're righteous, kept the law blameless, your house in order, prophesied it 7 hours straight, fasted 2 days out the week, right? You then gave alms, yet all your unrighteousness, all your righteousness and unrighteousness is still going to commend the righteousness of God, because the Most High don't sleep. He's on fire 24/7. You can't compete with the Most High. It says, what shall we say? Is God unrighteous who taketh vengeance? Meaning, even in our unrighteousness that commends the righteousness of the Most High, what's the point of us getting judged at that point if we're going to always be unrighteous? I speak as a man. God forbid, for then how shall God judge the world? Meaning, even in our righteousness, or whatever the case may be, we're going to have to still be unrighteousness in his sight for the Most High to judge the world, that all mouths may be shut before Yahweh Shem Yahushua. It says, for if the truth of God have more abounded through my lie unto his glory, why yet am I also judged a sinner? And we're all judged a sinner, right? In the truth of God, right, through the gospel, right, in the uncircumcision and the ministry given by Paul, have more abounded through my lie. His lie was the life he used to live. Him being a murderer. Him being somebody that persecuted the church. Right? Him being somebody that was contrary, right, to Yahweh Shem Yahushua. It says, his glory, why yet am I also judged a sinner? Check that out. So if all his truth and his works have more abounded, why is he still yet a sinner? It says, and not rather as we be slanderous reported, and as some affirm that we say, let us do evil that good may come, whose damnation is just. It's the point. What then? Are we better than they? No. Meaning, even in all of our righteousness, that still commends the righteousness of God because we all fall short. No, in no wise, for we have before proved both Jews and Gentiles that they all are under sin. So Paul breaking it down, man. I mean, breaking it down. That's why Paul's letters are so deep. I mean, the law is deep. These epistles are deep. Prophecy is deep. And a lot of people can't get it, as Peter said best, right? They wrestle, right? Let me get that quick precept. Unto their own destruction. Because you get the wrong person to get their hands, right? You get the wrong person to get their hands on this book, right? And read it. They're going to be overthrown. Right? This is the book of Romans. So like it's the book of 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse, right? Number 16. As also in all his epistles, speaking in them of things in which are some things hard to be understood, which they that are unlearned and unstable rest, right? Meaning fight, as they do also with other scriptures. Because if he's not talking about this, then that must contradict what it was foresaid to happen by the prophets, which is going to jink up and mess up all your understanding. See where you really have the truth or you don't. It says unto their own destruction. Right? This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 14. If by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are of my flesh, that I may save some of them. If, so like if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? And he's posing questions to confound these men and questions they can't answer. For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. The first fruit, when you go into it in the lump are our fathers. The lump is the foundation of the tree. You have the first fruits. The first fruits, you may have a tree, you have the first fruit of the tree. And then more fruit grows. More fruit grows. You have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You have our fathers. You understand? You have Moses. You have Aaron. You have all of these men till you get to Peter, James, John, till you get to Paul, right? Till you get to the men that are on the earth today. So the first fruits be holy off of the tree. The lump also is holy. Right? So let's paint the picture. And tree is likened unto a man. You understand? See if we can get this real fast. All right. So you have the stock, and at the bottom you will have the roots, and then you will have the branches. The branches are men and tribes. The fruit are your works. You understand? So like, bear with me. Kansalaki. Right? So the trees, like when you're going into it, are men. But then you might have a nation that's a tree. Like the Lord said, he took the highest branch of the cedar. Right? When you read the book of Ezekiel, right? The 17th chapter. But I want to get this real fast. It says, for if the first fruits be holy, the lump is also holy. Meaning you can't change your forefathers. If your forefathers were holy, then you're going to be holy. You understand? If the root be holy, so are the branches. Right? So like, Salaki. Right, I'm going to read that again. It says, if the root be holy, so are the branches. Let me get this quick precept in Ezekiel. But matter of fact, let me get this other precept in the book of Matthew, the 7th chapter. Yeah, you can hook it up, Bubble Shaw. It's the book of Matthew, chapter 7. And I'm going to start at, let me see. Water. Verse 16. It says, ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit. So if you're a good tree, you're going to bring forth good fruit. But a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. That's letting you know with this precept alone, and we could pull a million of them, that you can't draft in other nations. You can't draft in other fruit. Because even in the law, you can't mix or sow diverse seeds. Right? That would be contradicting on the agricultural level and contradicting, right, biblically, man. Let's go get Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 19. It says, ye shall keep my statutes, thou shalt not let thy cattle gender with diverse kind. Man, you can't let your cattle gender with all of these different other beasts. Can't yoke up an oxen and yoke up a mule and a donkey and yoke up a horse and yoke up a mule, and they're all just doing their own thing. Why? Because one is going to be stronger than the other. One is going to pull and it's going to kill the other. That's why the Lord said, don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers. Why? Because one's going to pull you, the other one's going to go left, the other one's going to go right. They're going to end up killing each other. On one fold, it says, thou shalt not sow thy field with mingled seed. Mingled seed means you got all this different fruit growing up. You got this carrots and mixing that with potatoes, and potatoes kind of sprawling up, and all of the apple trees coming up right in the midst of it. That's confusion. The Lord is not with breeding new types of fruits and vegetables and or mixing that field, because it's going to overthrow the harvest. Because you have certain plants and certain vegetables and different things like that which spring out in June, and you have certain things that may come out in August. So on the agricultural level, it just makes sense spiritually and physically. That's going to overthrow your whole vineyard. It's not good husbandry. How much more spiritually and physically in this world? Esau can't come out of Jacob, man. It's impossible, right? That's going against Numbers, the 36th chapter, right? It's going against Psalms chapter 16 and verse 5. Everybody shall maintain their lot. Right? We just read that in Ephesians, the 1st chapter, right? Everybody's going to have their lot that they continue to be in, right? In predestination. So you can't even mingle a seed or go against with an agricultural level. That's why the Lord said, going back to Matthew, it says, a good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit. Neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit is hewed down and cast into the fire. Right? So you can't have different nations all on one tree. That wouldn't make any sense, biblically and physically. It says this. It says, and it's like I'm going to touch on the first fruits, because the first fruits are our fathers. Right? But I'm going to prove that. Let's go to Hosea, I believe the 9th chapter. It's Hosea chapter 9, and I'm going to start at verse 10. I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your fathers as the first ripe in the fig tree at the first time. So you have the wilderness, but then you had their fathers. When you had two generations, you had the generations that saw the works of Yahweh Shem Yahushua. You had the generation coming out of the wilderness, right, that didn't see the works of the Most High, right, that they may have proved to war when you read the book, right, of Judges, 2nd chapter, verse 10 all the way down. But they went to Peor and separated themselves into that shame at their abominations were according as they love. As for Ephraim, their glory shall fly away like a bird. Meaning they once had glory with the first ripe and the first forefathers, but then the fruit that came out of them, right, it flew away. They fell away from the birth and from the womb and from the conception. Check that out. They bring up their children, yet I will bereave them, that they shall not be a man left. Yea, woe also to them when I depart from them. And the Most High departed, man, right? For a season. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11 and verse 17. And if some of the branches be broken off. Now, when you actually go into a physical treeology, right? If a branch breaks off of a tree, it can't grow again, right? But let's prove that real fast. Sadly, right, large branches cannot be rooted in their entirety, but a few small twigs cutting may be salvageable, right? So once that thing is broken, it's finished. That's why it's such a miracle and merciful that they were broken off and alienated and damn near got rid of, that the Most High had them to flourish and to be in the same root and graft it back in. Because once it's broke, it's over with on a physical level. You'll see trees like this, right? Trees like that. Trees don't grow out from the branches that have been broken. Once it's hewed down, guess what? It's hewed down. It says, and if some of the branches be broken off, the branches that are broken off, like I said, you have tribes, right? You had the northern kingdom that were broken off. It says, and thou being a wild olive tree. Now, Israel's likened it to an olive tree, right? Let me prove that. Wild olive tree meaning what? Wild by nature. You're not contained. You're not in the spirit. You're not obedient. You're wild, like a wild beast. The Lord called us a wild ass or wild ox. An ox knoweth his owner, his ass his master's crib. But Israel doeth not know, my people don't consider. The Lord said, be not as the horse and mule, which need Bible and Brit to be put in thy mouth, like in wild ass. Let me get that real fast. So our people are like wild asses, man. And in Job, the 39th chapter, I'm going to get that real fast too. We're always known as wild. We're either a wild ass, a wild horse, a wild tree, right? This is the book of Psalms, chapter 32, right? And I'm going to start at verse number 9. It says, be ye not as the horse or as the mule, which have no understanding, whose mouth must be held with bit and bridle, lest they come near unto thee. So don't be like a mule or a stubborn ass that you got to yank and you got to force to do something. Those are wild animals. Don't be wild. All right, let's get Job real fast, chapter 39. It's Job chapter 39, right? And I'm going to start at verse 5. Who have sent out the wild ass free? We're the wild ass. Who sent us out free? The Most High did. Or who have loosened the bands of the wild ass? Meaning what? We've been in slavery. We've been in captivity and bondage. Who set us free? Know who your maker is. Know who your creator is. Know who Yahweh Bashim Yahushua is. Who have set the wild ass free? So what are we known as in the scriptures? A wild ass. We're known as wild people, right? Because we're likened unto these beasts when we're not moving in the spirit of Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. But a righteous spirit as a lamb, you understand, they're going to follow their shepherd and be in order, right? Anything else is strange. Let me get one more precept. Let's go to Isaiah, right? Chapter 5. We're also known as his strange vineyard. Right, let me get this real fast. Right, this is the book of Isaiah, chapter 9. So like in chapter 5 and verse, I'm going to start at 7. I mean, this whole thing is fire. I'm going to really start at, really want them wild grapes, but I still want to read down some more. I'm going to just start at 2. It says, and he fenced it and gathered out the stones thereof and planted it without choice vine and built a tower in the midst of it and also made a winepress therein. Talking about his vineyard, his nation. And he looked that it should bring forth grapes, and it brought forth wild grapes. So we're always looking at is wild. but not in order. So when it says right here, and if some of the branches be broken off, and thou being a wild olive tree. Why an olive tree? Olive tree brings forth oil, understanding, riches, and knowledge. Let's get the book of Psalms, chapter 52 and verse 8. The elect is an olive tree, right? It says this, but I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. So you have many trees. Like the Lord said through the hand of David, I seen the wicked spreading forth like a green bay tree. You have many trees that are mentioned, right? Green, I believe that's Psalm chapter 37. Green bay tree. Get this quick precept. 37:25. It says, I've seen the wicked in great power and spreading himself like a green bay tree. Because the green bay tree branches in its structure, it spreads very, very vast, or like a fungus. It's big. It spreads very wide. Look at this. Now look where the root is and how it expands so far right from it. Let's see if I can get a better picture. Yeah, that's probably the best bay tree picture I've seen. Kind of mixing up other types of trees, in the midst of it. But that's what they do. They spread, all right? So, I mean, different nations are likened to different trees, right? Like the Lord said in the book. Let me get this quick precept. Let me finish this precept and get this next precept. I'm like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the mercy of God forever and ever, right? Let's go to the mighty book of Isaiah, chapter 14 and verse, right, number 6. It says this. It says, he who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, he have ruled the nations in anger and is persecuted and none hindereth. Right, this is the destruction of the so-called white man and the king of Babylon. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They bring forth into singing. So the whole earth, meaning all the inhabitants thereof, bring forth into singing. Yea, the fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon sing. Since thou art laid down, no feller is come up against us. Hell from beneath is moved from thee to meet thee at thy coming. Right? So the Lord is saying different nations and trees of the earth are rejoicing at your destruction. You understand? And even the cedars of Lebanon. Right? What are cedars of Lebanon? But you have the fig trees, you have the fir trees, you have many trees, the green bay tree. But the elect is likened unto the olive tree. That's why as a complete tree as whole, Paul used an olive tree, because that's the elect. Right? This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, and verse number 17 again. And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou being a wild olive tree were drafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree. Because you're still going to be a partaker of the root if you're broken off, because you're of the same tree. Now, through the mercy of Yahweh Shem Yahushua, you're going to grow again. You understand, and be drafted back in. Boast not against the branches. Meaning, just because those branches, the northern kingdom, were broken off and alienated, right? And I'm going to get that real fast. What was going on in the time of Micah? What was going on during the time of Amos? What was going on when you read these books and jump in the spirit of them? The northern kingdom were in sin. Let's read Micah chapter 1. It's the book of Micah chapter 1 and verse number 1. The word of the Lord that came to Micah the Morshonite in the days of Jotham, Hazah, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. We just read earlier on in a lesson what was going on during the time of Jotham, right? And the son of Hezekiah, Slakia, Hazah, from the time of Hezekiah that came in. But we was reading up on that history of Hazah during the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, their wars. So this is during somewhat around that time. It says, hear all the people, hearken, O earth, and all that therein is, and let the Lord God be witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. For behold, the Lord cometh forth out of his place, and will come down and tread upon all the high places of the earth. Now, this is twofold. One is going into World War III and destruction via the hand of the holy angels and destruction. But on a context level, him coming down and treading upon the high places of the earth. What are the high places of the earth? All the places where they had set to do sacrifices upon all of those high hills. That's him treading upon the high places. Because in the ancient world, they would go upon a high mountain or a high hill under a tree, and then they would sacrifice unto the spiritual demon Satan. That's the high places of the earth on a contextual level. And the mountains should be molten under him, and the valleys be cleft. So what do you do on the top of a mountain? You get high up and you do a sacrifice, right? But like I said, this is deep because it's actually going into World War III also. As wax before the fire, and waters that be poured down a steep place. For the transgression of Jacob is all this. And for the sin of the house of Israel, what is the transgression of Jacob? So the Lord posing the question, what's Jacob's sin? Is it not Samaria? So the Lord getting down, he letting you know Jacob really going off is Samaria. Samaria is what? Capital of the northern kingdom. And what is the high places of Judah? Are they not Jerusalem? Right? Because Jerusalem is the throne of the Lord, the chief out of all the cities of Zion, right? So it says, therefore will I make Samaria as a heap of the field, as the planting of a vineyard, and I will pour down the stones thereof into the valley. The stones is where they made altars to sacrifice. It says, and I will discover the foundations thereof. Discover the foundations, meaning what? They used to hide when they gave up animal sacrifice and child sacrifice. They used to hide. What do you mean hide? Let's go to it. Let's go to the mighty book of Isaiah chapter 57. And that's just like Jake now. You want to hide in your sins. You want to go in the dark. You want to go to the club. You want to cut the lights out. You want to be evil as if the Most High can't see you. Let's go to the book of Isaiah chapter 57. And I'm going to start at verse 7. And it reads, upon a lofty and high mountain hast thou set thy bed. What is the bed being set? To commit idolatry, adultery, sexual lust. But it's not physical. It's through the idols of the land. The Lord said upon a lofty and high mountain. So that's the high mountain and the hills that it's really talking about in the context level in Micah. It says, even thither wentest thou up to sacrifice, so like to offer sacrifice. So they went off. Behind the doors also of the posts hast thou set up thy remembrance. Behind the doors. So it's letting you know they closed doors, they boxed themselves off, they were very promiscuous and evil and secretive. For thou hast discovered thyself to another than me, and are gone up and has enlarged thy bed. Enlarge thy bed, meaning made thyself more accessible to other false gods and deities, and made thee a covenant with them, that thou lovest their bed, whether thou sawest it. That's evil, right? Let's go back to Micah. The Lord said he's going to discover their foundations. And also when you go to the book of Amos, right, I want to touch on this too, right? All hell was breaking loose during the time of Amos, right, with idolatry and going into, right, the northern kingdom, right? And all of this is history when you go into these minor prophets, right? I want to touch on that too. It says, and all the graven images thereof should be beaten in pieces, and all the hires thereof should be burnt with the fire, and all the idols thereof will I lay desolate, for she gathereth it of the hire of an harlot, and they shall return to the hire of an harlot. So the Lord was angry with the northern kingdom. Let's go to Amos, right? Let's start at this whole thing is fire. I'm gonna start at 10. I'm gonna start at 9. Published in the palaces at Ashdod, and in the palaces of the land of Egypt, right? So the Philistines, the Egyptians, and say, assemble yourselves upon the mountains of Samaria, and behold the great tumults in the midst thereof, and the oppressed in the midst thereof. But they know not to do right, saith the Lord, who stored up violence and robbery in their palaces. Now that palaces is where you do sacrifices at. It's where they were going to. It says, thus saith the Lord, an adversary, they shall be even round about the land, and he shall bring down the strength from thee, and thy palaces shall be spoiled. It's not talking about they just was living in luxury, man. The palaces and the storehouses and things that they did was upon the altars of Bethel when you go into this. And they had altars. So, I mean, the northern kingdom, as under Jeroboam, he set up and he built up all of these things because he was an industrious man. And those things lasted, and they built up altars of Bethel, and they just waxed worse and worse and worse as he built it all up in idolatry. It says, thus saith the Lord, as a shepherd taketh out the mouth of the lion of two legs, a piece of an ear, so shall the children of Israel be taken out that dwell in Samaria, in the corners of a bed, in Damascus and a couch. Right? This is the point, verse 14. In that day that I shall visit the transgression of Israel, upon him will I also visit the altars of Bethel, and the horns of the altar shall be cut off and fall to the ground. And I will smite the winter house with the summer house, and the houses of ivory shall perish, and the great houses shall have an end, saith the Lord. So they built up all of these houses and altars and palaces in vanity, in idolatry. Right? So the Most High is showing you over and over and over how they went off and how great of a mystery of them coming in could really be, right, to men that already knew the history. If you were actually living in Jerusalem during these times and seeing these things, you would know the spirit. Right? I'm going to get this quick precept. Let's go to Luke chapter 9. And they were trying to call fire down from heaven to destroy, right, the Samaritans. Right? This is the book, right, of Luke chapter 9, right, in verse number 51. And it came to pass, when the time was come that he should be received up, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. Right? So to Yahushua, he was steadfastly to go through that region, and sent messengers before his face, and they went and entered into a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him. Why do you have to send messengers before his face? And they went and entered into a village of the Samaritans, because it could have been a war. It could have been a fight breaking out. It says, and they did not receive him, because his face was as if though he were to go to Jerusalem. So, I mean, if they would have presumptuously went in there, ain't nothing going to happen to the Lord. We know his lot upon the earth. But, I mean, those messengers were for a reason. And they didn't receive those messengers that were to set his face to go that way. It says, and when his disciples, James and John, saw this, and then they saw that their messengers and their request was denied to enter into, they said, Lord, will thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elijah did? So they were pissed off. Their zeal wasn't in a righteous zeal. They had that love like Peter. Lord, say it's not so. Shall nothing happen to you, Lord. Right? Say it not be so. Now you're going against the Most High now, because that's his lot. Even though it's not something you want to hear, it's something that has to happen. The same way they're trying to destroy their own brethren, right? And they knew the spirit that was going on in the division during that time. And what the Lord say? But he turned and rebuked them and said, ye know not what manner of spirit ye are of. You don't know what you're doing. For the Son of Man is not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went into another village. And what men's lives were he talking about? The northern kingdom. The Lord loves the northern kingdom, huh? The Lord prophesied it about them coming into the fold, right, in the book. Right, let me get this quick precept. In the book of John, chapter 10. It's the book of John, chapter 10. And I'm going to start at verse 16. Right, it says, and other sheep have I, which are not of this fold. So you have many folds. You have the northern kingdom, you have the southern kingdom. So the fold that was accepted and followed the Lord at that time were the Jews. But he have other sheep which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and they shall be one fold. That's Ezekiel chapter 37 and 15. and one shepherd. Check that out. Let me go back to it. This is Romans chapter 11 and verse, right, number 18. Boast not against the branches, but if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. Thou wilt say, then the branches were broken off that I might be drafted in. Right? The branches were broken off that I might be drafted in. The branches, like I said, are the tribes. They were drafted and broken off that they may be drafted in. Well, because of unbelief, were they broken off? And thou standest by faith, be not high-minded, but fear. Meaning, don't boast yourself of your standing still in the Lord just because you're of the circumcision and have the oracles of God. And don't be high-minded of yourself as if you're over top of these men when y'all the same branches. You're the same people. It says, but if God spare not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not thee. Right? The natural is earthly, sensual. He didn't spare the natural branches. He broke them off. And the Lord will do that the same to you. He'll break you off. He'll blind you. It says, behold, therefore, the goodness and sovereignty of God of them which fail. Sovereignty but toward thee, goodness. And if thou continue in his goodness, otherwise thou shalt also be cut off. If you'll continue in the truth and the gospel to show your brother love and accept them as unto yourself, right, you're not going to get cut off as they were. And they also, if they abide not still in unbelief, shall be drafted in. Meaning if they come to the belief and faith of Yahweh Shai, God is able to draft them in again. Meaning what? Give them the adoption of sons. Let me get this quick precept. That's what an adoption is so mighty and prophesied about. Let's go to Romans, the 8th chapter. This is Romans chapter 8 in verse, right, 19. For the earnest expectation of the creature waited for the manifestation of the sons of God. There's many folk. That's us in the world not knowing what we were doing, what our lot was, what our purpose. We're waiting and we're expecting for the manifestation of something of this earth far greater to teach us and show us and guide us of Yahweh Shem Yahushua. For the creature was made subject to vanity, as we all are. Not willingly, meaning we don't want to be off, but by reason of him who have subject the same in hope. That's the only reason we go off, that we may subject, meaning give our life and be led to and subject to be in order to Yahweh Shem Yahushua and hope. Because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption. The bondage of corruption is the law. That's the bondage of corruption. They were delivered out of that type of righteousness into true righteousness. Because the bondage of corruption, who was given it to? The circumcision were putting men under bondage and corrupting them and not really showing true righteousness, nor what glory really is, and to the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. We're all in bondage. We're all locked up into the coming of Yahweh Shai to show us how to be free. Free mentally, free from the law of death, and being cast down and alienated and banished, not the law, period. He set us free from the law, meaning he set us free from condemnation of the law. Verse 23, and not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves grown within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body. So that's going to truly redeem us of our body by being not under that yoke. That's really what it's going into. And then on another fold, the redemption of our bodies is glorious bodies, right? Being beamed up into everlasting life, not having feeling pain anymore. For we are saved by hope, but hope that is seen is not hope. For what man seeth, what doeth he yet hope for? Right? Now I want to jump down to Romans chapter 8, right, in verse number 16. I'm gonna start at 14. For as many are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. That's talking about them that were alienated, those that were afar off. If you're led by the Spirit of God, you're the son of God. It's not saying that, you're the son of God just because you know how to read the book of Proverbs. Right? Let's go to John, the 1st chapter, verse 10. Let's prove that. Let's dive into that. Let's break that down. Let's go to the book, right, of John, chapter 10. Says the Most High is not impressed with just the bloodline. You have a lot of crackheads and fools and junkies and murderers that are Israelites. It's the book of John, chapter 1 and verse 10. For he was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. Meaning nobody knew Yahweh Bashim Yahushua except for the elect. He came into his own, meaning the Jews, and his own received him not, meaning they looked at him as if he was a blasphemer. But as many as received him, check that out. Who received him? The northern kingdom, the southern kingdom. Those that were alienated, those that were afar off, those that had faith, those that had no righteousness of the law, but through faith and mercy believed in him to be their shepherd, to draft them in into the fold. To them gave he power to become the sons of God. That's how they became power, because they got adopted back in. That's how he gave them power to become sons of God. Not that it's an Edomite or a Moabite or an Ammonite he gave power to, because they weren't a son of God. It's not what that's talking about. A son of God, you have to be, everything has to be spiritual and physical. You're saved by faith and by works. That's physical and that's spiritual. You have to be a son of God outward and inwardly. You can't be a Jew just outwardly. You have to be a Jew inwardly. You can't be circumcised outwardly. You can't just be circumcised outwardly. You got to be circumcised inwardly. All of these things are twofold. The same way to become a son of God isn't just your bloodline. You have to receive the Lord. He has to receive you for the adoption of you being alienated afar off. Even to them that believed on his name. Because the Jews didn't believe on his name. A lot of them. But guess who did? Those that were alienated, which were born not of blood. Now this trip up a lot of people, this part. Which were born not of blood, nor of the will of flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. Meaning they're not just born after the flesh, but after the spirit. Because Yahushua begot you. Just like we went into earlier on in the lesson, Paul had many sons. Titus was his son. Timothy was his son. Wasn't just born of blood. It's not just of blood. Because the Lord said in the book of Luke, let me get this quick precept. The Most High don't need the Jews to do anything. The Most High doesn't need anything. Think the Most High needs something? You're sadly mistaken. Is the show going to stop just because you don't do something? It's the book of Luke, chapter 19, and verse number 40. It says, and he answered and said unto them, I tell you, that if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. The stones are the northern kingdom. The stones are the Jews that are alienated or far off. The stones are them that aren't waking up yet. The stones are them that are afar off. The Lord said, if these shall hold their peace, meaning the people that have the oracles and the truth, I'm not going to say anybody I know or me myself or anybody in the nation, but that's say the elders. They would have all just stopped teaching in all of the camps. Guess what? Somebody wake up in the middle of the night and start screaming the Most High's name and start being on fire. The Lord said the stones would immediately cry out. That's physical. You don't want to just say, well, that's just spiritual. That's not literal. They're not going to cry out. It's just, no, they're going to be on fire. Crying out is what the Lord told you to do in the book of Isaiah chapter 58 and verse 1. Cry aloud. Spare not, man. That's physical. They're physically crying out on the streets, man. I don't know about other brothers, but when I teach, I can't be quiet, man. I can't. Hey, brother, you over there. You got a minute? No, we got to cry aloud, man. We got to go into the gates of the nobles. The Lord said, wisdom crieth without in the book of Proverbs, the first chapter, verse 20 all the way down. She uttered her voice in the streets. How long, ye simple ones, will you love simplicity? So, yeah, that's a physical cry out. These stones are men, and they will be set on fire to cry out the Lord's name. So it's not just of that foe. The Lord is going to cry out and set these men and bring them back in through the Spirit. So it's not just of blood. It's not just your Jew club, man. I'm a Jew. It says, nor of the will of the flesh, because men were boasting in the flesh. When you read the book of Galatians, let me get that quick precept that men were boasting in their flesh. Let's go to Galatians chapter 6. That's evil to boast your flesh. This is the book of Galatians 6 and 13. For neither they themselves who are circumcised keep the law, right? The hypocrites, but desire to have you circumcised that they may glory in your flesh. That's evil. That's kind of sodomitish. They're grabbing you up, making you do something to say, yeah, I'm the one that got him circumcised. Yeah, that's me. He's circumcised now. Now they're glorying that they got you circumcised. Not the word glory, I don't want to be long-winded, but I want to get this definition. What are you glorying in? All right. Get this quick definition.
Glory.
Fame, prestige, honor. Check that out, man. So, notoriety, reputation. Right? So, those men were glorying in the flesh, but they weren't glorying in the works of the Most High. So that's what set those men apart. Right? Let's go back to the book of Romans, chapter 11, in verse number 24. It says, for if thou were cut off, it's like you're cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and drafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these? Who is he talking to? The Jews. Who's the audience? The Jews. That's who he's talking to. Right now, it's written for our learning's sake and applicable for all Israel, but he's confounding these men and admonishing these men of understanding how his gospel is, and he's bringing in to the Gentiles, which be natural, slakia branches, be grafted into their own olive tree. So he's posing a question these men can't answer because they're ignorant to the truth. It says, for I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits. That blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Right? What is that going into? All right, let me get this real fast. And I got to come back to this precept. Let's go to the book of Galatians, chapter 4. It's the book of Galatians, chapter, right? I want to read this whole thing. Chapter 4 and verse 1. Now I say that the heir, as long as he is a child, differeth nothing from a servant, though he be Lord of all. An heir is somebody awaiting the throne, right? Maybe a prince, a son, whatever the case may be. As long as he is a child, he differeth nothing. I mean, there's nothing different between a servant, though he be Lord of all, because a servant can't give orders and he can't rule. The same way a child can't, even though he's awaiting the throne, but is under tutors and governors. A tutor and a governor is the law. They're the instructors. They're the teachers. They're the guiders. They're to show you how to get to righteousness. But through your fall of it, by not obtaining it perfectly, grace and mercy covers it all. And to the time appointed of the Father. The time appointed of the Father is Yahushua. Even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. So the Lord likened our estate to being under the law and being subject unto death and bondage and not knowing righteousness and completion. He likened it unto children. But you have to grow up, man. You have to rise. You have to grow into what? An heir. You have to grow into a leader, a king, right? It says, but the fullness of the time was come. Meaning the same thing that reminded me of this precept, because the Lord said until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Because there's a set time for things to kick off and come into its fullness. Esau has to rape the earth into its fullness, his height. Esau has to be destroyed, right? He has to have a set amount of time to do evil, right? Our people, they have to have a set time to wake up. Everything's to its full and set time, right? It says, let me go back to that. It says, well, bondage into the elements of the world, right? The bondage. But when the fullness of the time was come, God sent forth his son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. That's the true redemption that we're going throughout all of these epistles. That's the adoption of sons. And what do we say? And because ye are sons, God sent forth the spirit of his son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. That's the spirit that's in us. Wherefore thou art no more a servant, but a son. If a son, then an heir of God through Yahweh Shai. Check that out, man. So, I mean, see how the roles have switched, right, in the New Testament. Verse 26. And so all Israel shall be saved, meaning the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion a deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob, right, which is Yahweh Shai. For this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sin. As according to the gospel, they are enemies for your sake, but as touching the election, they are beloved for the Father's sake. Right? So it says concerning the gospel, they are enemies for your sake, right? And they were. But as touching the election, right, the elect, they are beloved of the Father's sake, because they were drafted back in. For gifts and calling of God are without repentance, right? Meaning the northern kingdom didn't do anything to be called back to the fold. They weren't righteous. Mosai said, now is the time where they were righteous. Come on home. No. What did they do? They acknowledged the Lord. What happened with, I'm thinking of all these precepts. Let me get this quick precept. What happened with the prodigal son? What in-depth righteousness that he wrought that had him to come back home? What did he do to come back home? Let's read it. I'm going to read this quick point. Right? 20. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion on him and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. What righteousness is that? It says, and he arose and came to his father. So all the Lord wants you to do is acknowledge his righteousness, acknowledge his son Yahweh Shai, come back home. You understand? There's no in-depth breakdown of all their righteousness. It said when he came into himself, when you read this, I want to find that precept where it says that. Salakia. 17. And when he came to himself, he said, how many hired servants of my father had bread enough to spare, and I perish of hunger? So he came to himself. Meaning he knew that he was serving the wrong thing and he was in the world and he wanted to come back home to his father. That's what it's all about. The gifts is mercy and calling, right? Meaning predestination to be drafted back of God are without repentance. For as ye in time past have not believed God, yet have now obtained mercy through their unbelief. And it was through their unbelief that they've obtained, right, mercy. Let me get this quick precept. When you actually go into it in Zechariah prophesied it about it. How many prophets have prophesied it about the northern and kingdom split? Right, this is the book of Zechariah, right, chapter 11, and I'm gonna start at verse 7. It says, and I will feed the flock of slaughter, even you, O poor of the flock. And I took unto me 2 staffs. The 2 staves are Judah and Ephraim, the one called beauty and the other one called bands, and I fed the flock. 3 shepherds also I cut off in 1 month, and my soul I loathed them, and their soul also abhorred me. And that's scary. The Lord said, my soul abhorred them, and their soul also abhorred me. Then said I will not feed you. Because who feeds us? The Most High. Who clothes us? The Most High. It says that thou diest. Let it die. That it is to be cut off. Let it be cut off. And let the rest eat every one the flesh of another. And Lord said, I'm done with you, man. And I took my staff, even beauty, and cut it asunder, that I might break my covenant, which I had made with all the people. So he broke us, man. Right? We were once together, but the Lord divided us, right, through his predestination, that the calling and mercy may come into play through prophesying, right, through all of these prophets that have been before us, that it may come to pass. Verse 30 says, for as in times past ye have not believed God, yet have now obtained mercy through their unbelief. Even so have these also now not believed, that through your mercy they also might obtain mercy. For God hath concluded them all in unbelief, that he might have mercy upon all. Because, through the righteousness of, let me get this quick precept. Verse 13, Romans chapter 2 and 13. For not the hearers of the law are just before God, but the doers of the law should be justified. This is the point. For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature things contained in the law, these have not the law, are a law unto themselves, which shew the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, that their thoughts in the meanwhile accuse of these accusing one another. Right? So it's written in their hearts, right? And their conscience is bearing them witness to the truth. Right? So it's not about the works. That's just half of the things that you need to be drafted in and be received of the Lord. Verse 33. Oh, the depths and the riches, both of wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are his judgments and his ways past finding out. And so he's commending the righteousness and the mind of the Most High. 4. Who have known the mind of the Lord, or who have been his counselor, who have seen, who have first given to him, and it shall be recompense unto him again. It says, for of him, and through him, and to him are all things, whom be glory forever. Amen. Right, so this was Romans, the 11th chapter, right? The in-depth breakdown or the drafting in, right, of the Gentiles. And when you read this, you want to break it down in the spirit, the correct way. And you want to go through all of these other books, right, to link it up through the spirit. I want to bring out this closing precept. Right, it's the mighty book of Revelation, chapter 3 and verse number 2. It says, be watchful and strengthen the things which remain that are ready to die. For I found not found thy works perfect before God. Remember therefore how thou hast received and heard, and hold fast and repent. If therefore thou shalt not watch, I will come on thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know what hour I will come upon thee. So continue to watch, continue to be diligent, continue to do the work of the Most High, continue to read, continue to do all things to magnify Yahweh Shem Yahushua. Most High willingness was edifying. Most High will not come back and do another in-depth breakdown. I want to give all honor and glory to the Most High God Yahweh. Ba'ashim Mashiach Wamalak Yahushua. Shalom.